Welcome to the latest interview in the United States Capitol Historical Society's series of oral history interviews. My name is Ron Saracen. I'm a former member of Congress from Connecticut and president of the United States Capitol Historical Society. This interview with Representative Doris Matsui is the final interview in our series featuring Asian Pacific American members of Congress. In these interviews, current and former members have relived their memories of people, places, and events that have shaped their public careers. It is our hope that these recollections will provide listeners with a deeper appreciation for the human dimension of representative government in this temple of liberty we call the United States Capitol. On March 10, 2005, Doris Matsui was sworn in as a member of Congress to represent California's 5th Congressional District. Congresswoman Matsui has long been involved in public affairs and politics. Prior to her election, she worked for numerous local, national, and international organizations, including serving as an official in the White House during the Clinton administration. Representative Matsui currently serves on two prestigious House committees, the Rules Committee and the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Welcome.
Thank you.
In our earlier interviews in this series, others have spoken about how moved they were when they first walked onto the House floor. Can you tell us what your thoughts were when you walked on the floor that day?
Well, as you know, this was a special election, and I ran for the seat when my husband passed away. So for me, it was a little bit different than for most people, I believe. Bob was a member of the House for 26 years, and he loved the institution. And I had always been affiliated with it and understood it, but not really understanding what it really meant. Until the day when I was sworn into office. Actually, it was 3 years ago today, as you mentioned, March 10th. And what happened was very much, as you know, the House floor isn't filled very often. But this particular day, everybody was there. And mostly, I believe, because they knew me, but they also honored Bob, very much honored Bob, and they felt that they should be there. So when I went to the well of the House and got sworn in and then made my so-called 1 minute, which was more than 1 minute, as you know those things are, I was filled with a great sense of honor, humility, and I also felt, too, some sense of poignancy because my son was there with his daughter, Anna, who was at that time 16 months. And Bob was supposed to be there, 2 months before being sworn in and the mass swearing in, as they always do, and he wanted Anna to be there. Well, he couldn't be there, and it was my swearing in that Anna and Brian was attended. And it was somewhat, in a sense, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but being in the chamber, looking at my friends in the gallery and seeing many of my friends, because I knew most of the people in the House, in the chamber, I felt very much, to a certain degree, Bob was there, and to a certain degree, I was coming home. And I reflected that 26 years before, Bob was being sworn in as a very young man with our son, who was 6 at the time. And so it was somewhat, to me, poignant and yet very gratifying that I could be there. And it was something that I would always remember.
It must have been a very difficult decision to make the decision to run for that seat after your husband had died. What went into that, and why did you decide to do it?
Well, Bob wasn't ill very long, but he took a turn, you might say. He wasn't supposed to die, let's put it that way. And it was that Christmas week when he got ill, and which we thought he was going to be fine. It didn't turn out to be that way. He brought it up to me because he didn't expect it to be happen this quickly or even planned on it at all. that he was concerned about the district, and he said, you know, you ought to think about running. And I said, ooh, that wasn't anything that I had ever thought about. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, it has to be your decision, and you have to make that decision. And I really felt grateful that he said that to me, because in a sense it freed me. I didn't feel like I had to do it. He passed away on January 1st of 2005, the first day of the year. And, you know, we're just so involved in planning the memorial services and the funeral and taking him back home to Sacramento that I didn't think about this at all until about the middle of the week, when people started mentioning the fact that they really wanted me to run. And I said, I can't think about it now. Please let me at least get through the end of the week. So at least it'll be a week after he's passed away. And I thought I could let it even go from time another week or so after that. And they said, no, you can't. You really have to think about this. So I said, okay. After I went through all the services, we flew him back to Sacramento, we had his funeral, then I could think about it. And that's what I did. I mean, he died on the 1st, he had the funeral on the 8th, with intervening services in between. And at that time, I got together with my family and we talked about it. And I had to decide, I felt quickly. Sacramento is a wonderful place. My experience of Sacramento is all the community, and the fact that I started there as a young married person. Bob brought me back home as his young bride, and we started our married life there. The Matsui family has been there since the 1890s, so it's home. And but it's also, if you know Sacramento, a political town too. The Capitol was there, so it's a place where people started thinking. And my friends really believed, my friends here and my friends at home, that I had to decide quickly, because this seat had been occupied with Bob for 26 years. Prior to that, you might have known John Moss. He held the seat for 26 years. So for about 52 years, there are two people occupying the seat. So this was an opportunity. But we worked very, very hard, and I decided that I would run, and that I felt that it was important for me to run for this seat. There were many things that, priorities that Bob felt were important, that I felt that I could be helpful with, understanding Sacramento and also understanding Washington. So I decided to run, and it was a very fast campaign, special election, essentially 2 months was what it was. And it was something where you start from a standing start to a full-fledged run. It was incredible. It was incredible.
I'm sure it was. What was the transition like from being a congressional spouse to becoming a member of Congress? And obviously you had been active for many years in your own political life, not as an elected member. But do you feel that all of those experiences prepared you?
Yes, I do feel that all those experiences prepared me, because to a certain degree, I knew the landscape, I knew the people, both in Sacramento and here, but I had a different role. And until I really assumed the role of member of Congress, I really didn't appreciate what it really meant, because, you know, I've been around it for so long. But focused on a lot of the other things that I was involved in. And Bob didn't discuss every single thing with me, obviously not. But we knew the same people. And yet, taking on the role was a lot different. It truly was. I was fortunate that I had been here and knew a lot of the people in both my nonprofit work and my work in the administration and my work in the private sector. So to a certain degree, I knew coming into it the various activities from different angles, you might say. So assuming the role was kind of interesting, because to a certain degree, when people come to lobby me, I can understand where they're coming from, but I want to hear something else too. Because to me, it's given me great insight in what people don't say and how they say what they do say, which is, I think, very valuable. Knowing how the administration works is helpful too. I believe that despite who's in the White House, Republican or Democrat, administrations usually act the same. Certain things happen in administration and you're aware of it. You know exactly in offices what position might be the person that might be the most important. People who don't exactly have titles but might be helpful. So it's, for me, been an interesting experience. It is a different role, and I think it's, in a sense, putting everything together that I've ever done in my whole life and utilizing it. And I find it to be very fascinating.
And you're probably better prepared than most members of Congress when they get here to Washington because of the experiences that you had in prior years.
I believe so. I know for a fact that I went through, at least when Bob got elected, more than 26 years ago now, but when he got elected, how difficult it was. The transitioning from Sacramento to Washington with a little one, and all the trying to figure out where the offices, just the process things. I already knew that already, which was a great help. And my son was already grown up, and that was good for me too, because I didn't have to think so much about basic child care or any of those kinds of household balancing things. I wouldn't say that it was easy. On the other hand, I felt that I had a lot under my belt, and so I can focus on the job itself.
Many people have written that spouses get a little bit of who succeed their husbands in office, get a little bit of a honeymoon. Do you think you got a honeymoon, and does it still exist?
I wouldn't say I had a honeymoon. I don't believe, I believe the elections are different today than they were before. And I think I mentioned to you before where Sacramento, even though it's a community of families and all of that, is still a very political town. I think my honeymoon probably lasted, if there's a honeymoon, might have lasted maybe 2 weeks. But that is the nature of politics. I felt, in a sense, and they felt, that I needed to be tested. And I think that was important to a certain degree, too. They knew that I was Bob's wife. They knew that I worked in the White House. They knew I'd been involved in commissions and boards. But, you know, Bob's role was a member of Congress, and I didn't. You know, I wasn't involved in that role, so to speak. So, you know, to assume, to even want to decide to want to be in that role, it was, I think, important for most people to see how strong I would be, if I knew the issues. And I just felt it was important to go through that. But I must say that the special election was so, it was a short election, to a certain degree, 2 months. And I felt that it was just important to be out there and to express myself in a sense that as a candidate. Once I got elected, it was important for me to become a member of Congress. And so I felt that my re-election in '06 was my election to a great degree as a member of Congress in the job that I've done.
Now, it was probably inevitable that some people expected you to carry on the priorities that Bob had created, and yet you found your own voice and made that very, very clear. And it didn't take you very long to do it. How did you make that transition very quickly?
Well, obviously in Sacramento we have priorities, our local priorities, like, you know, flood control and mass transit and all of that. And those are going to be a member of Congress in Sacramento's priorities. And I'm over there fighting for that all the time. On the other hand, Bob and I weren't alike at all. And when I took on the role, I remember at the beginning I used to ask my staff, and there are a few people who were carryovers from my husband's staff, now what would Bob have done? And then somewhere along the way, must have been 6 months later, I didn't ask that question anymore. I didn't realize I didn't until all of a sudden I started making my own decisions and not even thinking about what he would have done. I believe also that it was important that I serve on different committees. Bob was never on the Rules Committee. He was never on Transportation Infrastructure. And he was always on Ways and Means. And that's a different type of committee. So for me, I can express myself in a different kind of way because my committee assignments are different. And also, I am different from my husband. I have a passion for children's research and health care. He did, but in a policy way with Ways and Means. I go to the hospitals an awful lot. UC Davis Med Center is in my district to see what's going on, because that really does interest me, because I feel that it's very important for a member of Congress to be connected to what's going on in a district, especially today, because things are moving so quickly. And especially when you think about in challenging times. We're in challenging times today, and things move much more quickly, and you really want to make sure that you are at least on par with your district, and sometimes trying to move a little bit ahead too.
You and your family were interned during World War II. In fact, you were born in an internment camp in Poston, Arizona. Although obviously you were too young to remember the experience. Looking back, what can be learned from that experience in the war, and how has that impacted your public career?
I was born in an internment camp, Poston, Arizona, and my parents actually met in camp and married in camp. And I was born at the end of World War II, so I was probably 4 months old when they were allowed to leave the camp. But my parents never really spoke about it. And, you know, we were encouraged to be all-American in essence. I grew up in a small town, very active in all the activities, ran for office and participated in everything. And so for me it was, they wanted the American dream for me. To a certain degree, in a sense because they didn't get theirs. And they also didn't want me to have any chip on my shoulder or any feeling that I had any burdens on me. They were wonderful in that regard. And my father, he didn't really speak about it until after they started talking about the Redress Act and what could happen. He really didn't believe that anything could happen. But we started talking about it then. And it was really remarkable because he obviously was born and raised in this country. And his father came to this country as a young man, and well, actually he wasn't a young man, he was probably middle-aged, and married a young woman. And they had 2 children, but the whole family was, it was during the flu, and I guess the Spanish flu, whatever it was, in the 20s, or whenever it was, when the whole family got sick. My father's mother passed away. He was 5, and his brother was 2. So my grandfather essentially raised them. He never married. They were in Southern California, and they had a nursery. And my uncle went off and served, and my father had a business. It was a seed business with a partner named Murphy, which I didn't even know about until I started reading his papers afterwards. And it's interesting because they first did an initial evacuation to the Central Valley, and then they went to Poston. And it was interesting because I didn't know a lot about these things. He filled me in on it, and after he passed away, I read his diary. But he felt he had to be with his father, so he couldn't serve. His brother went off to serve, and then he went to camp. My mother's family, she was also born and raised here, and her parents were more fortunate in the sense that he was a fairly successful farmer. He owned land, in my mother's name, obviously, because he couldn't own land. And so when they had to leave, they had some wonderful friends, and I believe their name is the Sorensen family. And my grandfather had an agreement with them. Please live in our home and take care of it. You can take all the profits from the farming, but just try to make sure that it's there when we come back. So they did. And I saw some interesting letters between my mother and the Sorensen family about crops and would you please, my mother would say, would write to them to ask them to purchase certain things that they couldn't get in camp. It was quite remarkable. I really didn't know any of this had happened. You have to understand, these weren't things that I grew up with. They told me about it later, or I read about it. And my father said to me, and my mother had passed away before then, you know, when she was, this is much after camp, 20 years afterwards or 30 years afterwards. And my father afterwards said to me, when he was a widower, said, there are so many things about camp that were so bad when he first got there. With holes in the walls, there was no walls to speak of, but paper that they could find, old crates, and there was no privacy. But he said, you know what, we made it what we could make it. We tried to find every piece of scrap wood we could find to build walls. He said they didn't have fresh vegetables, horrible food. And so they got seeds to grow vegetables. And so they had a whole vegetable garden. And then they felt that they wanted to make the place look better. So they planted flowers. And he said, you cannot understand how it meant to see this flower bloom in this dry desert. And he said, it was something horrible. But on the other hand, they tried to make the best of it because they felt they were going to leave one day. And they didn't want to have wasted lives, let's say, during that time. So that's what they did. And my father also, being the way he was an editor of I think the whole post in camp. Before everybody was going to be leaving, he had a memorial book made. So there are pictures of everybody. Everybody was there at the time. And you know, I remember seeing something lying around when I was in high school. Never even thought about it. After my father died, about 13 years ago, we started cleaning up and found that again. And I had a better appreciation as to looking at the pictures of all those people, my father's friends and my family who were in the camp at that time. So it was truly remarkable. My father always said to me, you know, he said, as terrible it was and the fact that they had to go through it, he always said, the best thing that came out of the experience is, Doris, you were born. It was like something to look forward to. So you know, it did change my life to a certain degree in the sense of the way I think about it now. I have a greater appreciation for this country and the fact that it can look at that, admit it made a mistake, and move forward. And to me, it's important, I think, as Japanese Americans who've shared in that experience to ensure that it never happens again. That in today's world, too, that to have a balance of civil liberties and security. I think the lesson is very strong even today.
And that obviously is one of the most important issues that faces the nation today, the need for balancing national security while protecting civil rights. With your background and the experience that you've had and that you've learned about from your own family, do you find it difficult to maintain this balance?
I feel that it's important. This is a wonderful country, and the founding fathers were unbelievable, and what they has a basic definition of our country. And with the Constitution, which I believe is a living document, it does in itself embrace so much of what makes this country great. But because it's not, in a sense, we're not a monarchy, there's no socialism here. It's, in a sense, a fine balance here. And every once in a while, we have to balance it out because it goes one way and we balance it out another way. This is an interesting time because every single one of us as members of Congress understand how it's important to protect this country. I mean, that is our priority. We also understand that this country is based upon freedoms too, one of which is our civil liberties. And to a certain degree, that exquisite balance is what makes our country great. And to a certain degree, because we come from different parts of the world, we have different experiences, that is always being tested. And I have every bit of optimism that we can always do that, as long as we understand that that is what our founding fathers had seen for this country and what makes this country great.
You currently serve on two of the most important committees in Congress, Transportation and Infrastructure and Rules. Most people aren't really aware of what the Rules Committee does and how it works. Can you talk to us about that? What is the purpose of the Rules Committee?
The Rules Committee is a leadership committee. It is a so-called exclusive committee, although I also have Transportation and Infrastructure, but it is an arm of the leadership. And what it basically does is any legislation that has to hit the floor goes before the Rules Committee. So the people who come before the Rules Committee, the chairman and ranking member always do, and also other various people who want to have amendments made in order. In that respect, it's a very powerful committee. Everything that's important to the House comes before our committee. We hope as it comes to our committee, we can make the right amendments in order to ensure that the bill is better, that it can maybe attract more people for passage. But it's also an avenue for us to change things too. It makes it stop on the Rules Committee just in case too. And because of that, it is a powerful committee, and we do meet an awful lot too. And things that might be somewhat contentious especially are something that the Rules Committees have to deal with, which is why it is a leadership committee. And as much as possible, we do reflect the leadership. On the other hand, the discussions sometimes in the Rules Committee, I really wish more people can hear them, because by the time it gets to us and we can engage the committee chairman and ranking people and also some of the other members who want to make their amendments in order, it is quite remarkable what comes out in the Rules Committee. And sometimes that does shape the way we decide to make the amendments in order. It is a committee that I enjoy because from the perch on the Rules Committee, we know everything that goes on in the House, which is, it's you know, for someone like me who likes to know what's going on, it's really quite fascinating. But it also gives you a sense of how important the institution is. I feel like many times when you're in the other committees, you really get a great idea of the committee itself and what it does. The Rules Committee has to deal with the whole House. And to that degree, I have had much more appreciation for the history of the House and the fact that it is truly an institution that reflects the people. And because of that, our role in it, I feel, is very important. So it is a committee that most people don't know about. On the other hand, all of my members, all of my colleagues know what the Rules Committee is.
In their recent book, The Broken Branch, veteran congressional scholars Tom Mann and Norm Ornstein argue that increasing partisanship in Congress has undermined both public confidence in the institution as well as its own ability to perform its constitutional role. How would you compare your experience in Congress with Congress today and even Bob's experience? And have you noticed an increasing partisanship and a lack of comity? And has that hindered the ability of Congress to legislate? And what solutions would you suggest?
I do have a different viewpoint on this, I suppose because when my husband got elected in 1978, Democrats were the majority party by a great margin. And when we came here, we came together in a very bipartisan way. We would, at that time, meet at least monthly with our class in a bipartisan way. The spouses had their own group, and the Californians got together in a bipartisan manner. Everything was done pretty much in a bipartisan way. And because we had a young child, obviously, you know, the kids played together. The spouses were friends because we had our own activities also. And because of that, there was personal relationships across the aisle. And it was very nice because the members themselves could argue vociferously during the day as far as policy. But they were friends, because how can you be angry when your spouses, your wives know each other, your spouses know each other? The kids play together, and we did far more together. And that was another time, too, when most members brought their families back here. And it's different today. Most members of Congress do not come back here because things have changed. Most women have their own professional careers. It's too expensive to maintain two households. And for various reasons, things have changed. I believe the change has been because the social aspects of it are not as easily accessible any longer. And I think that's really sad. I have been here long enough to know that people hunger for that. And I think the reason that people hunger for that is that they just don't want this to be about work in the sense that it goes through 24 hours a day, that you're angry with all the time. It doesn't have to be that way at all. What I believe is important is that to move forward is to find ways to reach across the aisle. I try to do that on individual bills. I try to find a Republican co-sponsor or try to get people involved in ways because I think it's important. You can start with non-controversial things to bring people on. Unless people work together, they'll never start trusting each other. You can disagree in policy, but there's some things that you can agree on. Well, let's start with some of those things first and agree to disagree on some of the other things and laugh about it. And I feel that we can make progress in that way. It'll be slow, but we can make progress in that way.
Do you think you can find the time again for the social aspect of it, to be able to bring people together as it used to be?
It's going to be very difficult. I see many members whose families aren't here get together after work, maybe have dinner or something like that. Of course, our schedules are not conducive to much of that, but there are groups of people who like to get together, maybe play bridge or whatever it is. Those are the kinds of things, at least, and you see Republicans and Democrats do that. Bridge is not something that is just one party. Neither is poker, although I've never played poker. There are ways to do that. I think there might be some bipartisan activities, which I believe people are more receptive to now than they might have been before. We went through a time of difficult partisanship, I believe, starting in the 90s. And I think it's starting now to sort of, people are looking at it and saying, we can't keep on this way. Now, there's going to be some of it. We realize that, and it'll take a while. But this job is more than, it really is representing your constituents and ultimately the country. And ultimately, we need to work together to ensure that we do represent our constituents in a way that they feel we should represent them. And also think about the country also, because ultimately that's what we are. We're here representing the people, but we make decisions on behalf of the country.
Our final question is we say, the legacy question. Over and above the things you've accomplished or have yet to accomplish, how would you like to be remembered?
That's quite a question. I feel like I I have two grandchildren, Anna, who is 4, and Robbie, who is a year. They're my touchstone to the future. And I want to ensure that what I do today will make their lives better. And that's not only their lives, but every Anna and Robbie in every neighborhood in this country. So I want my legacy to be that I left this place better off than when I came to this place.
That is a wonderful thought. As one of the people who's watched your family grow, I've been the beneficiary of Bob's and your holiday cards every year, and I've watched your boy grow up in those cards. It's been an amazing progress. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the fact that you've given of your time to be part of this series. Thank you again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.